It is 3 o'clock, and I will be starting the meeting. So, Paula, could you kick us off with roll call, please?
Matt Guillory. Jorge Charnico.
Here.
Dylan Bradway.
Here.
Betsy Brunstetter. Donna Cervantes.
Here.
Tyler Holmes.
Here.
Lee Peoples.
Here.
Ben Sellers.
Here.
And James Barnum.
Here.
You have a quorum.
So everybody should have received the minutes in their packet. Does anybody have any comments regarding to the minutes from April 26th? If there are no comments, does anybody have a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve.
Okay, Donna motions.
Second.
Tyler seconds. So we put it up for a vote. Okay, so we're going to call for a vote. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? We do not have any cases withdrawn today, nor do we have continuance request. We do have one consent docket item. Michael, could you brief the commission, please?
This is what amounts to a minor revision to a previously approved certificate of approval that was granted back in, I believe, early 2016 to the Red Agnews Park, which is in the center of the Cottage District. And the changes basically consist of modifying the canopy on the north side of the building, altering the ratio of landscaping to ground cover, introducing a retaining wall on the north side of the site, and changing the approved light fixtures, changing the bike racks that are in the project. They're also deleting the revision of the landscape improvements to the southeast, southwest corners of the block at the park. And this has been put on the consent docket because all the proposed changes meet the applicable regulations and guidelines, and were recommended approval to the commission.
So do we vote on this, or is it just simply, okay? So do we have to have a motion? Okay, so do we have a motion to approve?
I'll move approval of the item on the consent docket.
So I've got Lee and a second by Ben. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Okay. We will move on to cases for individual consideration. As the chair, I'm going to make a bit of a change. I'd like to move up what is called out as item B, UDCA 17-00011, up first, rather than what was previously listed. So, Michael, if you could brief the commission.
This is a proposal to revise the signage in the effort to rebrand the Shepherd Mall to what will be known as the Shepherd Center. The proposal involves a removal of 4 attached wall signs and 6 freestanding accessory signs on the site, with the introduction of a new freestanding sign at the corner of Villa and Northwest 23rd, and also installation of new freestanding signs along the Villa frontage and the Northwest 23rd Street frontage. The reason the item is before you is twofold. One is that all signs over 100 square feet must come to the commission. The second is that the sign at the corner exceeds the maximum allowable display area and therefore requires a variance. And when a variance is required, the commission must provide a recommendation on the variance to the Board of Adjustment. We have provided you some analysis of the proposed request, along with identifying the signs to be removed and signs being installed. In essence, it's pretty much an even swap. The sign areas are pretty much similar for all the freestanding signs. They may be slightly larger, and in fact, with the freestanding sign at the corner, which is this sign right here, it is certainly slightly larger in terms of a height. And then also, we've explained in the staff report that even though half of each of the three sides that are visible of this sign has no lettering on it, by definition of the sign code, that area that has no writing on it does count toward the sign area, and that's why the sign is so much bigger than the code allows. So we had thought when we started writing the report for this project that the existing signs would have had a variance as well, but we were unable to find one, and that's why we're before you today with a request for a variance on these signs. We have analyzed the proposal and determined that it is comparable to the signage that is already in place out there, and recommended approval to the Commission. Prepared to respond to any questions the Commission may have.
Does the commission have any questions for Michael?
I have one question. On that sign you were just showing, would they be able to add more text in the future? Or?
They could if they chose to, and it wouldn't necessarily come back to the Commission because it wouldn't really enlarge the size of the sign. They're getting the variance they would get if they do receive one would be for that area that is blank right now, but they could add lettering to it later on.
Okay, just curious. Thank you.
Any other questions from the commission? Would the applicant like to speak to the commission? If you could, sign in, state your name and address as well.
My name is Cameron Gleason. I am with GNS Sign Services located at 1019 East Grand Boulevard, representing the Shepherd Center, the owners of Shepherd Center. Really, like the question before with adding new tenants possibly to the future, it's very possible. I wouldn't necessarily say that the plan is to, in the future, add new tenants, because this is more of a it's more of a landmark sign locating Shepherd Center. Not really, it's because it's not much of a retail store anymore. It's much more office area. I will say that the Shepherd Center sign that's there now is actually considerably smaller as far as width, because at an elevation, those rings are 14 foot in diameter, and the sign that I'm proposing is only 11 foot in 11 foot width. And it's only 3 foot taller. So roughly the signage area is roughly pretty much the same. But we are struggling with the fact that we don't have a variance on this property, et cetera, et cetera. But also with the Shepherd Center being small letters and with the code of Oklahoma City, we have to include the entire structure as a signage area. But I'm open to any questions that you may have.
Does the commission have any questions for the applicant?
I got a quick question. Is the sign going to be lit at all?
Yes, the Shepherd Center, those letters will be internally lit.
Any other questions? Does anybody from the public want to address the commission at this point? Okay, do we have a motion from the commission?
Motion to approve?
Do we have a second? We have a second? Right here. Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Opposed? All right, it passes. Now we move on to...
You need to make a second motion for the recommendation on the variance.
Oh, I apologize.
I'll make a motion to recommend approval of the variance as stated in staff recommendation E2.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, now we can move on to UDC A 170001. Michael, could you brief the commission, please?
This is an application for a triplex dwelling unit on the east side of North Sartell Avenue between Northwest 8th Street and Northwest 9th Street, just south of the alley. This case has been before you 2 times prior this year, once in March and once in April. Both of those times there was a continuance request filed by the applicant. At this time, the case has been brought back before you, and you will note that the prior 2 staff reports had a recommendation for denial. This application has changed the recommendation to approval, and that is largely because there have been changes made to the project that have removed some of the issues that we had identified as concerns in the previous staff reports. Most significantly has been the change to plat the site into 3 lots so that the 2 southerly lots no longer have access to the alley. That, in effect, exempts them from the requirement to take access from the alley. And while we may not be in support of the idea that was done, nevertheless, they legally have no access to the alley anymore, and we cannot impose the guideline that requires access from the alley anymore. As a consequence, the only remaining issue is a guideline that relates to architectural character and compatibility. And as is consistent with department policy, when the issues are reduced to a guideline such as this, we typically will recommend approval of the project and leave the determination on compliance with the guideline to the determination of the UDC. And that's where we find ourselves today after a couple of months of changes to this project that have been made. You'll also note that changes have been made to building materials in the project, so that issue is no longer a significant concern, and we are left primarily with just the issue of the height of the structure and the design of the wall that is adjacent to the existing residence next door. We've provided you a recommendation or an analysis of that condition at that property line. And as I said earlier, we've provided a recommendation to the Commission of approval of the project. I'm prepared to respond to any questions the Commission may have.
Does the commission have any questions for Michael? Would the applicant like to speak?
Yes, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant. Also have the applicant with us and the architect to address any questions you might have. Let me fill in my name real quick to make Paula happy. All right.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Appreciate your time, and I want to thank staff for working with us. We spent a lot of time between the last meeting and today working with staff because there were several issues identified in the previous staff report, some with materials, some other things. So we spent a lot of effort with staff to make sure we could find a solution that was that met our needs, but also met the design needs and the guideline needs that we have for this area. And as Mr. Philbrick said, we're down to what the staff identified in the report. There were really 3 issues. One, the 3-story issue. The irony in this, and I've faced it several times for multiple clients, is if that house south of us were to go away, the individual would be required by the zoning regulations to build a 2-story house. And so the fact that we're out of scale with what is now a legally non-conforming height house, frankly, is creating a hardship for my client. Because if that was built to what the code requires now, there would be no issue with scale. But for reference, there are multiple homes throughout this area in which you have large structures right next to existing older structures. It's worth noting that the individual that sold my client the lot that we seek to build on today owns that home to the south. To my knowledge, that person is not here, has not registered any sort of complaint. And so if we think about what this guideline is intended to do, it's intended to protect perhaps the abutting property owner. So in the absence of the abutting property owner having a big concern, I would submit that the purpose for the guideline and why we need to regulate that is not present. Two, on the materials, the fiber cement panels, and as staff has advised in your staff report, they do recommend that it be allowed, and that the documentation we have provided shows that the materials are equivalent to other materials that are permitted within the district and that have been approved by this body time and time again. And then finally, the at-grade entries. So as staff correctly pointed out, that the commission has routinely waived the guidelines in the cottage district for contemporary houses. And so what we have are 3 individual lots that will be sold as 3 individual brownstone type units. And so it's not a triplex. It's really 3 individual lots that will be sold as 3 single-family homes that are a brownstone type of design. We believe that we are in conformance with all the relevant guidelines and regulations for the city and in the cottage district. That's why staff has recommended approval. We've taken a lot of steps to get to this point so that we had a product and application that met all the guidelines. That was important to my client to come before this commission with an application that conformed to everything that they are required to conform with. We believe we've done that now. We believe that's evidenced by staff recommended approval. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. I would like the architect to come up and walk the commission through the elevations and the materials. And so if you have any questions specific to that, he'd be happy to address those.
Okay.
Sign in real quick.
And again, if you could state your name and address.
Yes, my name is Jared Stout. I'm with Wade Design Group. We are at 2009 North Kelly up in Edmond. This project came to me from the Hudson Group, and we were trying to come up with a concept in Midtown to not oversize it, but actually bring downtown into that type of area. So we went with this brownstone project, really escalating the floor plan where we have a true master that overlooks downtown but also has the comfort of Midtown. We also kept the west facing towards the sunset for the Oklahoma sky. This project, material-wise, as David has mentioned, we wanted to express a couple different materials, trying to stick with. Do I do that? Oh.
So can he take,
You can take it to the microphone.
Okay, let's start with the main entry floor. We're going to keep a large media center down below, along with the garages. And then the main floor, we tried to really open up. We put some sliding glass doors on the back, the Nana wall style, to really open up towards downtown and open up that living space, since we are tight on the lot. And to actually move on from there, try to. This is the master suite I was referring to. So this is the overwhelming part of, we want to take the small living downtown and actually embrace it in Midtown and give that that client the actual feel of where they're living. Okay. Okay. That's it. Thanks.
does the commission have any questions for the applicant? I've got a couple if nobody has any. Independent of the house adjacent to this property, it seems like the scale is above and beyond what you see throughout the district. And I'm curious how you've tried to address that scale issue in your drawings.
I'll let him address that. I would note that we are in conformance with all of our height regulations, all of our setback regulations, so there's no issue from an ordinance perspective about height, but I'll let the architect.
scale-wise, we were trying to meet the adjacent structures across the street and so forth, the three-story buildings there. We're trying to get away of the old style that actually is next door, as David Box explained, that would no longer be compliant. So we're trying to raise up to the surrounding area.
But you seem to cover a lot more of the lot than some of the other properties. Is that not correct?
That is correct. Keeping it a three complex brownstone, we were forced to 22-foot wide living. The far inside, we actually did expand that up to 26 just to make it a little nicer, larger family area.
Okay. Does anybody else in the commission have any other questions? Okay, if not, I'll open it up to the general public. Does anybody have any comments?
I'm Nancy Hall at 731 Northwest 8th, so I own the property right there. It's a beautiful property. When I bought it, I thought it was single-family dwelling, and I had my driveway there, and my utilities go across there, and I just cannot imagine a wall up against my windows that I can look out on, and to tell you the truth, right now I've got legal action because I don't think that that property has always been sold as one, and I know that I never was informed that I thought I was paying the taxes. And so the person, Matthew Warren, that bought the property, I explained all that to him, and there was a letter written to him, legal action is going on, so I don't know if they want to build right now while there's a lawsuit in progress. And besides that, I just think it would ruin the look of that beautiful 1905 built house that's a single dwelling. And so I don't know why somebody would want to build three things on a tiny lot. It's a half of a lot. And so I guess I'm just in shock. So.
Ma'am, I'm sorry, could you clarify which house? Where do you
The
live?
Mediterranean-style house on the corner of Chartel and 8th Street, 730. They're building in my backyard, basically. I had a fence around it, and the city gave me permission, so they thought it was my property too. And nobody's ever come to me and really cleared that all up, and so I've got a lawyer looking into it, and is progressing on it. So that's. And my utilities run through there, and my driveway is on that lot, so I don't...
Michael, could you help us identify where her lot is? I want to be sure I understand the context of her comments.
Subject site is this dashed line here. Ms. Hall owns the property right at the corner.
Okay, so it's that single, if you could go to...
It's this, excuse me. It's this house here at the northeast corner of Chartel and Northwest 8th Street.
Okay.
So that this wall that you see in the south elevation here would be what is behind her house.
Okay. Is there anybody else from the public that would like to speak?
My name's Kevin Thurman. I live at the house at 924 North Chartel, which is just to the north of this. And like Nancy said, when she bought that house, she was under the impression that she got the rear lot with it, which that lot is just a 50 by 70 foot lot. Now, in the past, the Haas brothers tried to build a triplex on a 50 by 140 lot, which you all denied and make them go to, which are the duplexes down the street. This being a half a lot, to put 3 houses on that, it's totally out of character with the whole neighborhood, and my house and her house is just out of scale. And a question I would have for the architect is, they're going to drive in off of Chartel, which is going to call cutting the curb. They're going to be backing out over a sidewalk. I'm under the understanding that they're working on getting a bike lane put on Chartel, so they would be backing into over a bike lane also. And then Chartel is also an arterial street, 4-lane street, to have garages backing out into that. I just don't see how it's going to work. Another thing, the topography of the landscape, the back of that property is 6 feet higher than ground level at Chartel. So I don't understand how the back garage doors off the alley are ever going to enter into that property.
Anything else?
That's about all. That's about all.
Okay, do you want an opportunity, is it appropriate to have him respond, the architect, to those questions, if you could?
Yes, when it comes to the height differential, it will be a drop in the garages. About 3 feet is really all we need. 2 to 3 feet, actually. I think it's, that curb is actually at 2 feet right now, but there's a slope past that. And so the garages will be dropped down. The plate will remain the same, though.
Okay. Are there any other comments from the public?
Good afternoon. I'm Bill Bleakley, 607 Northwest 7th Street. I apologize for my hat. I'm covering my visit to the dermatologist. I'm Vice President of the SOSA Neighborhood Association and making a presentation on behalf of the association. We have a variety of concerns. A very large one is opening 2 driveways onto Chartel. Chartel is a major artery with an estimated traffic count of 6,000 to 7,000 cars a day. One can reasonably expect that count to increase. There are no active residential driveways on Chartel south from 10th Street to downtown. These would be the first 2 to be enacted. The plans, as you will note, provide for very limited visibility to anybody backing out of those driveways. The structures of the house come right up to the sidewalk, and it is extremely limited visibility. The driveways also interrupt the continuous sidewalk that goes from 9th Street to 8th Street along Chartel, which is very vital to having a pedestrian-safe environment with a very busy street like that. Also, the city is planning on modifying Chartel in this area to provide for a bike lane along the east side of this street, which will have vertical stanchions dividing the bike lane from the street lanes. So if these driveways are in, there's going to be forced to have a cut in the bike lane protection that goes along that street. One question we have is the traffic personnel even seen this application or its impact on the traffic. Also, be reminded the neighborhood is working with others to revitalize Red Andrews Park, which is only going to increase the local traffic and pedestrian for that facility. As Mr. Thurman pointed out, they are putting this house on sidewalk grade. Mr. Thurman says that's a 5-foot rise there. If they're going to dig that down and they have this alley coming down, they're either going to have to take down the alley or they're going to be below the grade of the alley and have to come up. They can't redo the whole alley because if they are, they're disturbing the alley for the rest of that block, cutting their alley down below grade. And who's going to bear that cost? There is a manhole on the sewer right to the north of this particular property. The 3 changes that staff has related to that justify the change in the recommendation are in fact pretty minimal. There's a limited amount of R-panel metal on the original design. They're converting that to standing seam metal. They're changing the CMU blocks on the south side facing Mrs. Hall house 2 or 3 feet away from the wall with stucco. I can imagine if you try hard, you could probably lay cement block without getting on the other side. It's going to be interesting to see how you can stucco this wall when you don't own the property adjacent to it. The other thing is the recession of the garage, the 2 feet to give the turning radius, which is another minor change. So there are no significant changes that Mr. Box has worked out on this deal with regard to changes in the thing. It's still a huge box with 2 blank walls on the north and south side. Our overwhelming concern is the scale, character, and architectural detailing of this project is inconsistent with and disrespectful of the surrounding area and the cottage district in general, an area that we have put great effort into raising the aesthetic and design efforts of. The public driving up and down Chartel, if this project is built, will see 2 40 by 60 foot walls either coming or going up and down Chartel. It is Chartel is a major artery through the cottage district, and this project will have a negative visual impact. The association is intrigued and concerned about changes in language between the first staff report denying this project and the second staff report after Mr. Box undertook the representation. The March 22nd staff report disapproved the application, saying this project represents a substantial challenge to the preservation of the character and context of the cottage district neighborhood. It would be difficult to argue that the proposed structure respects the scale, character, and architectural detailing of the adjacent loose. This got watered down in the May 24th report, which says this project may not provide an appropriate translation and may not respect the scale, character, and architectural detailing of the adjacent use. The 3 minor changes with the materials and the driveway do not justify an about face on the effect this project will have on our neighborhood. We're also concerned about omissions from the March 22nd staff report and the May 23rd staff report relating to the street access, where the garages ought to be. Now, this is an interesting point. Mr. Box tells you, well, hey, this has been divided into 3 lots now, or 3 sub-lots. They're now going to be about 23 feet by 60 feet. It's been divided like that, so we no longer have access. Well, excuse me, you cannot benefit from your own actions. They had access to the alley if they designed it as the staff suggested in the first staff report, but they chose to impede their own ability to do that by creating these plat splits. Other language in the first staff report related to streetscapes are established within this district to create an attractive and animated sidewalk environment and to foster safe and efficient pedestrian movement. They have complete ability to propose a structure on this that would be reasonable to the space and get it garaged and accessed onto the alley. They are creating this own situation on their own behalf. Another interesting point is Mr. Box says these are 3 individual residences. Well, under the code provisions for the cottage district, if we have 3 single-family residences, they have to have a setback in proportion to the setback of the other houses on that block. Mr. Thurman's house is very much set back from the street. Mrs. Hall's house faces 8th Street, so that's a side yard situation that doesn't really imply that the intention is, if these are single-family residences, there has to be a respective setback that is in agreement with those on the street. The other language that was deleted from the March 22nd report was the language with regard to the staff recommendation on denying the application. And the 2 elements that haven't changed today are the project does not respect the scale, character, and architectural detailing of the adjacent use. The project includes front-facing garages that take direct access directly from North Chartel Avenue when alley access is available. There have been no material changes to this project to justify eliminating these concerns and provisions or for approving this application. These concerns are valid and overwhelmingly justify the revision or rejection of this project. The focus should be on the development of a modest-sized project with garages on the alley and design features that are compatible with the neighborhood. The subdivision of the small half of the lots, 2 lots, into 3 parcels should not be allowed to justify the approval of this project, since this was the action of the applicants and is intended to thwart the other arguments. Thank you for your time and consideration.
I need a little bit of help here, but it doesn't seem like we can, the lots are subdivided, that's outside of our point of consideration. So well, go ahead.
It would seem to me that the city's lot split practice would take into consideration what is going on with this parcel. I am not thoroughly schooled in what the lot split practices are that the city has, but when I was looking at one for my lot on 7th Street, I was informed that it was a very complicated practice, and I would assume that whoever split this lot, it was a 10-day period, and from the form, the stuff on the form, it doesn't look like there was any inquiries into these kind of factors that it would seem appropriate to do.
So I don't disagree with your point, but I think that's outside of our considerations as it's presented to the Urban Design Commission. So I just want to point that out. Quite a few points.
Sure, and I'll try to address as many as I can, and please stop me if you do have any questions that I don't address that were raised. To the point about the lot splits, I believe, and I'll defer to your legal staff, but you have to analyze this case as the facts exist today. And as it exists today, we have 3 lots, 2 of which that have no legal or physical access to the alley. So therefore, the only access points that we would have would be to Chartel. I don't think the motives or how it came to be is at issue. The only thing at issue is we have 3 individual lots, 2 of which have no legal and physical access. But I'd like your city attorney to weigh in on that.
I agree with that. That would be my interpretation, too, as to the access requirement. And again, this is a deed approval under the subdivision regulations, so as long as they meet the requirements under the subdivision regulations for deed approval, then it's approved.
Right. On the comment that there were no other driveways on Chartel, after that was made, I quickly got on my phone on Google Earth and reviewed the other homes that are on Chartel south of 10th Street. And what you see are, I think there's only 2 that are actually on Chartel, both of which have access from Chartel. So what we're asking for is not uncommon. It's not out of the ordinary. Frankly, it's what everyone else has done along Chartel. In fact, the individual that owns the home to the south of us has access in her garage off of Chartel. It was our understanding, we had tried to reach out to her, so we apologize. We weren't aware that she would be here today. We're not sure about the lawsuit she's referring to. We own title to the dirt that we're here on today. We couldn't have submitted this application without title or authority from the title owner. So I'm not sure what legal action she's referring to, but we'll try to get with her after this and get to the bottom of it. To the huge box, and it's disrespectful to the character of the area, this is the same argument that this neighborhood makes in every single case that they come before this commission and ultimately the Board of Adjustment and fight. The dwellings at Sosa, that exact issue has been frankly litigated up and down, and that was the basis, that it's out of character, it's out of scale, it's a huge box, it's not like anything else in the neighborhood. So when we think of design and we think of what a property owner must do, we have to be guided by our guidelines. And this application conforms to those guidelines. So setback, that's an issue dealing with ordinances and what's required, and that deals with scale, and we meet all the setbacks. Height, we meet all the height requirements. Lot coverage, we meet all the lot coverage requirements. So it's our belief that when you do that and you meet all the guidelines and you're within what the guidelines would permit, that you should be allowed to develop within your legally vested zoning rights and the guidelines. And so we appreciate the concerns, but the concerns are the same concerns that are raised every time there's an application in this neighborhood before this body, or if it ends up at the Board of Adjustment, before the Board of Adjustment. So perhaps new ordinances need to be drafted. Perhaps new guidelines need to be drafted. But until they are, a property owner ought to be able to develop pursuant to the guidelines as they exist today. And so we would agree with staff's position and ask for your approval.
So character is very subjective, and I think we're here to speak to that before it gets to the Board of Adjuster. I have concerns about the character of a big 30-some-odd tall wall, and just how you can say that that's within character. I mean, as I drive through that area, I don't see big walls like that. So I'm curious as to how, and I tried to ask this question earlier of the architect, how is this wall in character with what you see in the rest of the district?
So, and forgive me, because I am not an architect. I am just a simple lawyer. But if we had like articulation on that wall, I mean, what is it that would make it within character?
Well, I mean, it speaks to the detailing, architectural detailing. So as I look at this wall, there's detailing at the top, and that's about it. It's just a wall. So architectural detailing would certainly help, and it would help potentially with the scale, but I'm not here to be prescriptive and play architect. I'm just speaking to my perception as I see this wall.
And that, all I'm trying to do is, because it is, character is subjective. And, you know, part of, I guess, what we're doing here is we're regulating taste, and I'm not sure what would make this in character. When you say details, I mean, are those like faux windows, or those
Again, I'm not going to play architect. I'm simply stating just my observation, my subjective observation is that this wall doesn't meet the character of what you see elsewhere through Sosa. And
you can probably define character better than I can. Let me have him.
This is a zero lot line. We are very forced to comply with fire restrictions and stuff like that, and we are on that line. And so the architecturally detail, we had to give it to the front of the house, knowing that somebody might take that house in the future and build straight up against us, and we need that to be compliant with what they're going to build. And that was the concept behind that.
Okay. Go ahead. Nope.
Tim Albro with Castle Rock Homes, 2009 North Kelly. I'm the general contractor on the property, for the project. To reiterate what Jared had said, since we are on a zero lot line, fire marshal code allows, or will not allow, doors, windows, etc., to be on that side. We did speak with Lisa a while back, I think maybe Michael, that we would sure be open to maybe a decorative pattern, like a better words, on that side to help that eyesight, break that line, that vision up. But we also know that at some point in time that another structure would be right next to us, and turn that would be gone. But the fire issue is the main concern, that we cannot have penetrations, openings to that adjacent structure.
Understood.
And if I could address on the driveway issue, because the alleyway, forgive me, I don't know the numbers, but the alleyway is here, slightly tapers off the distance to the street on the front, is that, I know the retaining wall is 2 feet, slopes up maybe a foot. We see no reason for the slab, because we have to build our slab up so high anyway. And then the step down to the garage, full access, we do it on corner lots, step down houses, time and time again to access the property.
Just while you're up here, the CMU wall I could see being built from one side. How do you stucco? I doubt she's going to give you access to her property.
We've mentioned stucco. We've mentioned brick, CMU. CMU was going to be difficult access to the property. That is maybe a minor detail that we still have to work out, because I was not aware that she was going to be here. I have stopped by her house a couple of times trying to track her down to discuss those options with her in the future. It's done in New York City. It's done in a lot of properties elsewhere, so there's a way to be done, whether it's brick or CMU or whatever product it is.
Yeah, I wanted to point out a couple of things we alluded to in our staff report about the scale character issue. One, I think, without getting knee deep into the design, that the height of the third floor parapet, the height of the roof, could easily be reduced. That's a pretty tall difference between the top of the door, the roof framing, and the parapet. I think that, to me, that's the obvious way to reduce the height. We mentioned that in the staff report, and that's something that hadn't occurred to me till now. But again, on the same issue of scale, is if the third floor were set back a little bit, any distance on the south side, I think that would go a long way toward transitioning to the adjacent structure.
Does anybody else have any comments?
I'm not planning on, I love that house, so I'm planning on leaving it there, but my question would be, as far as character, would any of you all like to look out your back window and see a big tall wall? It doesn't seem in character to me. And another thing about the alleyway, that's where my utilities go. I'm concerned about what's going to happen with those, and I don't have really a way to get into my house except through the back door or up the, 10 flights of stairs. My back door, and that's the way I get from the alleyway. So now I'm concerned, without having access to the alleyway, what I'm going to do, as far as my utilities and getting into my house and parking. I don't have any place to park, even though I have a driveway that's this long off of Chartel. I can't park on Chartel. So I don't know how that's going to be addressed.
David, does the design team want to address that? Because we asked questions about utilities in our early meetings, and I thought you had it worked out.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to do whatever the city makes us do. Tim Johnson Associates is the civil that's been working on this, but, I mean, if there are utility issues, then they'll have to be worked out, and the city's going to make us comply with whatever the regulations are for water and sewer. We'll have to deal with that.
Tim Johnson is aware of the only utility that she has crossing the property now is her sewer, and Tim Johnson's aware of that, and we have a plan to resolve that, or he is working on a plan to resolve that, and I understand he spoke with the city on a solution for that.
Is that conceptually moving it out to the street?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, the association is doing due diligence to protect its neighborhood against undue development. Mr. Box always gives the same proposition that this is a checkoff list. If we have met all the requirements that are in the code for Cottage District, we can do whatever we please. So why is that language in the code that assigns to you as the Urban Design Commission the latitude to make these kind of subjective judgments on the impact on the district or such? I mean, let's just go buy a rubber stamp for Lisa and Susan and do away with all this if it's all just a matter of a checklist of it can't be over 50 feet tall and it can't be blah, blah. So I strongly urge that we disregard that. And again, I go back to they created these 3 lots. And we're doing a shell game now. Are we dealing with 3 separate individual lots and each standing on its own, or are we dealing with a package on a little bitty lot? Should we have 3 applications for each of these parcels now instead of 1? We're just creating this nonsense game of having a small lot and a shell game on these lots. Let's ask these people to come up with a reasonable project on this lot that takes into consideration its size, accessibility, and the surrounding property.
Okay, I just assume not get into a debate over the commission itself. We have a case in front of us.
One quick thing on the character. I mean, what is striking to me in this area, if you think about why it's considered the cottage district, the original homes in there were small cottages. And so the argument that, well, this is out of character because it looks different than everything else, well, if that's the mindset, well, then the contemporary modern homes that were built should have never been allowed because they're out of character with the original cottages that were there. I mean, what this district has become, it's kind of a hodgepodge, and that's why it's neat. You've got a mix of architecture, a mix of ages of homes, and that's what I think, from an outsider, makes it a truly dynamic neighborhood. But to say it's out of character because it doesn't look like the rest, well, this neighborhood wouldn't be here if we stuck with character means it's got to look like what's already been here before. And so that argument to me has always perplexed me because of why this place is called the cottage district. I mean, if you look at the original homes that are still there, the Mediterranean house to the south, there's only one other Mediterranean house that I know of, and I had to fight like a dog to get that approved at the Board of Adjustment because everybody fought it because it was out of character. Well, I would submit it in 1905, it would probably establish the character. So everybody else is out of character. So I think that's why we have the guidelines. Sure, they're subjective. I'm not suggesting that there's a rubber stamp, but it's hard to, define why one case it's out of character when other cases are within the character. And so I think all we have is, hey, if we're within the guidelines and we're meeting city criteria, I don't think it's a rubber stamp. I mean, I think a developer should have to, work with staff and make sure that they're doing things to make it as good of a development as possible, and I think they've done that here. And so we would ask for your approval.
There seems to be some confusion or miscommunication between the applicant and the adjacent homeowner. Is there a desire to try to coordinate that and come back to us?
Yeah, we can try that. It's our understanding that she's actually renting this out as an Airbnb, and that's why we had difficulty getting with her. Is that accurate? Okay.
Okay, so the question, let me rephrase the question. So would the applicant want a continuance in order to initiate a dialogue with the owner?
I hadn't had any letters or any communication except this morning a call from, what's his name? Elite. I can't think of his name. What? Brent. He called me this morning, but I was in a meeting all morning, so I couldn't talk.
Okay.
And that's the only communication I've had.
I have a question for the architect. Had you all looked into potentially, since you own all the property, into replatting it into one lot?
Well, the whole point was to make it a three-system brownstone. That's what the project came to me as.
Okay. I personally, I have issues with the garages right off of Chartel. Just front-facing garages. It's not consistent at all with the district. And I think there's still that opportunity to revisit, potentially replat it as one lot, and to then have access off the alleyway. Even in another circumstance, you could even at a 60-foot width, you could even look into doing 2 units, doing 2 off of the alleyway, and even laying off a little bit on the home on the south, because it really is, for instance, an example that I'm going by at the moment, 13th and Douglas, there's currently a property being developed there in Classen Tenpin. It's on the southeast corner, and it actually is 5 foot off of the property line, which makes it 10 feet away from the abutting building, because that also is 5 foot off of it. And it's a 3-story building, and it is next to the 2-story existing home that is like a historic look, a bungalow look, and it is completely overcrowding the home next to it. And just, like, that's just an example I go by, because in real life, it's extremely close, and it will overcrowd the home to the south.
That actually was a concept of ours, is just use the alleyway, and, but the two, having the two structures side by side, one would be hidden back, hitting another building that could be built there in the future, because it is zero lot line. And our front porch would be facing her house, in that essence. And we'd have a huge wall, as we do now, it would just be facing Chartel. It's something we played with, because since those are butting up to each other, I do have to come off all sides to make it work. Being as tight of a lot as it is width-wise, I would have been 30 feet for 2 units. And that's what turned us away from that concept.
Okay. I think it still would be worth maybe reinvestigating, because as is, I'm not leaning in favor at all for this. I don't think it personally fits the character of the area.
Okay.
I'm going to go back to the question posed to the applicant in regards to the adjacent property owner. If you don't mind, we're going to ask Michael a question. Go ahead, Donna.
Mike, I had a question about the comment that was made about the zoning standards now require a two-story. Can you address that?
I'm sorry?
If something was rebuilt to that lot to the south, there's a two-story minimum. Was that accurate? for this?
Yeah, the current standard requires a two-story minimum structure, and you get a variance to build a one-story structure.
And the way that this was subdivided, cutting off access to that southern lot, was there?
We have no purview over the subdivision platting process, and the platting process does not take into account our design guidelines.
Right, it's a separate process from design review, and it's according to the subdivision regulations.
I'm going to
Okay. Is there? We'll wait for you. Is there anybody else from the public that would like to speak?
Briefly, these are just two examples in close proximity that are coming around. Staff's got a copy of it as well. In talking about character and scale, these are large three-story structures right next to what looks to be kind of original bungalows, and so the idea that it's out of character. Again, this is frankly what this area has become. But to the issue of the access onto Chartel, I understand perhaps the concern, but you can't analyze it based upon you don't like perhaps why we're here. I mean, what we have now are two lots that have no legal and physical access to anywhere other than Chartel. So there is no other design element that can get access. And so it's not a matter of not liking it. It's just what the facts are. There's no other way to access those two lots as we stand here today, except for Chartel. So that is the only option. No matter what design elements you incorporate, I don't think that can come into your consideration when you're voting.
Well, I mean, that brings me back to my first question: could this still be replatted to be one lot?
Well, it's not.
Is
Then
that
you
really
can't consider
something
that.
we can't? That's not something that we can consider at this point.
I mean, it's technically and legally possible, but we can't require them to, because the committee has to weigh it on how it is legally exists today.
Well,
but it is, technically possible. Yeah.
Okay. without having access to the alleyway and with this current size that the lots were, it's kind of, I guess, in my opinion, it seems like, I guess I'm trying to explain it and be subjective. I think that it could have been, it could be a poor purchase in my opinion, because I think that with regards to how the district has developed, I think access into the alleyways is extremely important and is consistent with the rest of the district.
So I think this picture you handed out, specifically the second picture that shows the sidewall of this property, you bring up a valid point, but even if you look at this, you know, there's different materials on this wall. There is some detailing, probably less than I would want. But even as I look at this, I'm counting 1, 2, 3 materials, and it looks like there's some sort of setback in the back. So again, it's not just a stark brick wall.
Well, I wish we had a better elevation because it is a significant change from what would have been in your staff report last time, and it was dealing with staff that we added some detail to the wall to avoid the stark wall. Do we have an elevation of that wall in color? Oh, so no, not of the sidewall. But yeah, I mean, and if it were simply providing some more detail on that, I think my client would be happy to do that. I mean, the fear that I have is it appears that there are other issues outside of that. But adding some material, kind of adding some articulation there, I don't think that would be a big problem for my client. But some of the other comments are leading me to believe that even if we came back with a fully detailed wall, we might face some issues.
Yeah, I can only speak for myself,
Sure.
but there's two big issues. One is the scale of the entire development on the property, and then there's the wall. So breaking up the wall would certainly help, at least that particular issue. Are there any new comments from the public?
I wanted to add, too, that, you know, most of the houses in that neighborhood have backyards, and so I'm afraid it's just going to look like a monstrosity built in my backyard because there will be this much space, you know. So I just wanted to add that because now I don't have a backyard, and most of the properties there do have backyards.
Okay. Any new points?
I would just like to reiterate that the reason that they probably filed the 2 continuances was so they could get that 50 by 70 one single lot replatted into 3 lots so they could circumvent no alley access for the 2 lots. This was done afterwards. This was done after you denied them or went for the continuance the first time. In other words, it hasn't always been the 3 lots. This has just been done in the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
Okay, if there are no other comments, is there a motion from the commission?
There's no continuance. I'm
Well,
not agreed.
good point, Lee. I posed a question about a continuance.
We'd like a vote. We're happy to meet with the property owner to the south, but we'd like a vote today.
Okay. So with that, is there a motion?
Well, I have some comments, but they're along the lines of what others have shared. So I will go ahead and make a motion to deny the application on the basis that the project does not meet the regulations and guidelines of the Downtown Design District zoning ordinance as referenced in Section D of the staff report, and that the project does not respect the scale, character, and architectural detailing of the adjacent use.
Do we have a second?
Second.
That was Tyler. All in favor? Did we have an aye? All in favor?
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
Which, can you specify which part of D does it not comply with?
Page 3 of the current staff report, 7201G4, development pattern. And this references character, which was brought up in the discussion, but we never really got into scale, which is another issue. And both of those terms are defined in the zoning code. So they are within our discretion, but I do think we have definitions, and we have over a page of text from the staff explaining why it is out of scale, it is out of character.
Donna, do you have any other questions?
The staff recommendation says that the project meets the regulations, so I'm just clarifying.
Well, Michael stated earlier that that's the position they take. Would you mind restating what you said previously?
Yeah, I think if you'll go back over the history of the UDC and you look at projects, particularly in the cottage district, where we typically run into this problem, when the number of issues have been reduced to a guideline that is a subjective design type guideline, you will normally find, I think 99% of the time, that the recommendation from staff will be for approval and leave it to the discretion of the commission to make a determination otherwise.
Yeah, I want to reiterate, staff recommendations are not committee decisions.
I understand. I think it's just the way it was stated. So the motion.
So I'm going to have Lee repeat the motion, but just what I'm hearing is that this is their default.
Okay, but your motion is to deny.
Could you repeat the motion?
Yeah, let me repeat the motion. I make a motion to deny the application on the basis that the project does not meet the regulations and guidelines of the Downtown Design District zoning ordinance as referenced in Section D of the staff report, and specifically referring to 7200 1G4, that the project does not respect the scale, character, and architectural detailing of the adjacent use.
And it was seconded by Tyler. So all in favor of not approving the application as submitted, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
So we have one nay from Ben. So it does not look like this will be approved by the commission. So as soon as I find my agenda, we will, here we go. Other business, doesn't look like we have anything. Communications, we have 2 administrative approval reports. Michael?
Yes, both of these are for signs. One is a freestanding sign on Northwest 23rd in the vicinity of the Orange Leaf Pizza 23 building, and then the second sign is an attached sign for the Sasquatch snow cone stand in the Plaza District. Those have both been approved.
Okay, any questions for Michael? Comments from planning department staff? Are there any? Comments from commission members? All right, next meeting is June 28th, 2017. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.